Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The preseason is over, and the Browns cut the roster to 53 players. They still have 4 quarterbacks. They're also getting healthier with the regular season arriving in a little more than a week. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. How you doing, Chud?
Scott, I'm doing great because we are getting that much closer to Browns football. We're taping this on Thursday, which means we're 1 week away from Chiefs Ravens, right?
Yes.
Opening up on Channel 3, NBC, cheap plug. And then it's Christmas time, kind of for us. I mean, you had your draft last night. I have mine on Sunday. Fantasy football, baby.
Yeah, it's all coming back. We get a full slate of college football this weekend. Yeah, we're in the thick of this, bud.
Yeah, no question. So let's start out. We I know we talked about this last year, but I like how they do the roster when they did it. And, you're not having to worry about taking care of this on Saturday, right? Remember, it used to be Labor Day weekend on Saturday. That would be your whole weekend.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I remember being
Yes.
at a hotel between like wedding and reception on the phone with on the conference call with Tom Hecker doing talking to him about the cuts. So yeah, this is much smoother from a writer's standpoint. No doubt about
Yeah,
that.
no question. So when we look at it, Stefanski said it's the first 53, not the final 53. So as we talk about this, we have to remember that there could be some changes, right?
Yeah, especially I mean I mentioned the 4 quarterbacks at the top. I I have a hard time thinking they'll keep 4 all the way to week 1. And if they keep 4 to week 1, then it's a matter of, I guess, hoping somebody from another team, a quarterback from another team gets hurt, and they would want one of your quarterbacks, specifically Tyler Huntley, and you could trade him for some kind of low draft pick. So I just don't think they'll keep 4. So yes, this is an initial 53. It will be changed. That's to me the easiest example is they're not going to have 4 quarterbacks on the regular season roster. I don't think they're going to have only 2 running backs on the regular season roster, which they do now. 2 tight ends. Maybe they keep a third tight end on the practice squad and activate him for game day, which you can do, but that feels a little light as well. So there will be a little bit of movement. I was a little surprised they didn't claim anybody off waivers. Now, maybe they tried and anybody they liked, the couple of players they liked, went to a team with better priority on the waiver wire, which is based on last year's record. So the Browns would have been in the 20s. But usually that happens. You get a guy, then they have to make a decision. But there wasn't any of that. None of their players they cut got claimed on waivers, so they were able to sign 13 guys back to the practice squad. So there won't be as much movement at the bottom of the roster as I thought, but I'm sure there will be at least a couple of moves before we get to week 1.
To wrap up the 4 quarterback thing, it's almost like, fool me once, shame on me, or that whole
Yeah.
saying, right? Fool me twice. It kind of made me think of last year when they trade Dobbs, and then the whole year everyone's criticizing Andrew Berry for trading him. Then Watson gets hurt. You don't have a backup. You have to go get Flacco. They get light. It's almost like they're overcompensating from what happened last year, and they're just like, we're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah, I think there's part of that to this. I think what happened last year reaffirmed to Andrew Berry that you need to keep 3 quarterbacks and you need as many quality quarterbacks as you can get. And that seems like a basic lesson that everybody should know. But there's teams in this league that only keep 2 quarterbacks on their regular season roster. And you're playing with fire a little bit there. And I've no doubt that last year influenced the whole quarterback decisions, starting in the offseason. Tyler Huntley, the Browns already had Watson. They were going to sign Winston, and they had Dorian Thompson Robinson coming back. And on St. Patrick's Day, they add Tyler Huntley. And there's reasons for that. Watson's coming off the shoulder. Thompson Robinson's coming off the hip. You needed somebody else, or you wanted somebody else to take some of those offseason reps. But Huntley has started 9 games in this league. He started a playoff game with the Ravens, and I feel like the Browns said, okay, let's get as deep as we can at quarterback. And they did that. And it helps your roster, but they also think because they think big picture and they look at assets and that you can trade one of these guys because quarterbacks are there's more demand than supply across the league. So that's why I still think they'll trade one of them, and I think it'll be Huntley, and I think they're hoping to get some kind of a low round draft pick.
Now there was some rumors, right, about possibly could have been Winston traded, and Scott, I don't know if this is true. I just heard rumblings, and this could be totally way off, but that maybe Watson, doesn't really like having Jameis there. I mean, is that true?
I don't know where that came from, and I heard that discussed on the radio. I don't know. I never saw anybody write it. I never saw anybody say it on TV. So I don't know where that got started. It doesn't sound right to me at all, Chud. That's not how Jameis Winston strikes me. He does not come across as a guy who is threatening to anybody on that team. He is all energy and all positive energy. And all he's done is try to uplift Deshaun Watson since he's been here. So I would be stunned if that were correct. Now, what I don't know is, so if the Browns consider trading Winston, I don't think that's why. Now, maybe they thought DTR played so well in the preseason and is their future number 2, so he could be their number 2 now. And if they could get, I don't know, a 3rd-round pick for Jameis Winston or a legitimate backup tight end for Winston, then that would improve their roster. I could see that thought process going through the Browns' minds, especially after they traded Joshua Dobbs last year and thought DTR could be their backup last year. And now he looks so much better to me in this preseason, and his arm strength is better. So, and I've seen conflicting reports. I've not talked to anyone who gave me the absolute answer if they consider trading Winston or not. I think the way the Browns operate, they would listen to trade talks for just about anybody, and that would include your backup quarterback. But I think what happens is Winston winds up staying. He winds up being your backup, and it's Tyler Huntley that gets dealt. Is my assumption.
Next question, just answer it, quickly with kind of a yes and then we'll expand on it. But would you say that overall with the roster, not any huge surprises, maybe a mild 1 or 2, but would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so let's dive in deeper. D'Onta Foreman, that one surprised me. Is there more to this than meets the eye?
Well, that to me, that's the biggest surprise is D'Onta Foreman, and they only kept 2 running backs. Now they could bring him back, and it's easier to bring him back than cutting somebody that's exposed to waivers because Foreman's a veteran. He just had his contract terminated, so he just becomes a free agent, and it's up to him where he goes after that. And in the past couple of years, the Browns have used that avenue to save a roster spot. And you kind of turn 53 into 54 because you cut a guy and say, we're going to bring you back. And he says, okay. And maybe you sweeten the deal or what have you if you're the Browns. And you let him go. He's a free agent for however many days. And then he comes back. There's also a possibility that with the veteran, if they're on the roster week 1, the contract is guaranteed for the rest of the year. And maybe the Browns are trying to save some money there and thinking we'll sign Foreman back week 2. I don't know that. That gets a little riskier because then any other team, Foreman can say, well, if any other team wants me, I'm just going to go there. So I would not be surprised if Foreman comes back. And what makes me think that even more is they haven't made a move yet at running back. And they can't go into the season with only 2 guys. So whether that 3rd guy or 3rd and 4th guy are on the practice squad or a combination of practice squad, regular season roster, you just can't have 2 running backs. Those guys get hurt, and you have to have a backup plan. And the guy could get hurt Friday in practice. So I was surprised that he got cut. I think he could still come back, even though that's not guaranteed.
Did you go back and grade yourself? I saw your article where you predicted the roster. It looked like looks like you got an A. I mean, I only noticed two or three, maybe. I mean, the
Yeah,
Foreman, which I think almost everyone would have been surprised by that, and then the four quarterbacks, and then maybe just the one wide receiver spot.
yeah. I did not go back and grade it. You're right about those. The other two were I didn't have Mike Hall going to the commissioner's exempt list, so I had him on the 53. So I don't even know if that's a miss because he would have been on the 53.
Yeah.
And then I had them keeping Jermaine Ifedi at offensive line instead of undrafted Ricky Jovian Cohen. And so that was a 1-for-1 miss. And then they brought Ifedi back on the practice squad. But I thought they'd go veteran who had tackle and guard experience instead they went Cohen, who is an undrafted rookie. They liked him. He was a priority undrafted guy for them, more of a guard. But they went with two rookie guards, which to me was a bit of a surprise.
And then at wide receiver, I think you nailed it a couple weeks ago. You said they'd keep six. Thrash, though, is that's pretty cool? The rookie getting on. I mean, he must obviously had impressed enough of them.
Yeah, you know what? He got off to a slow start, I thought, in camp, and I think a week into camp he wouldn't have been on the roster, and then played well and started to show up in practice. Showed up in the preseason games. We know Andrew Berry likes to keep his draft picks, so I'm not stunned that they kept him. I'm not surprised that they kept him. I thought they'd keep him. I thought they'd keep Michael Woods II ahead of David Bell, and maybe that's probably me, Chud, just thinking that Woods is better than Bell, as opposed to what I thought the Browns would do, because they've shown that they like David Bell. They've kept him now. This is, I want to say, year 3 with David Bell, former third-round pick. I just don't see a high ceiling there, and I see a higher ceiling from Woods, but they believe David Bell's reliable, and he showed up in some big moments last year, and they were able to get Woods back on the practice squad. So, they still will have both those guys available and both guys on the roster. And if Woods outplays him in practice, then they can make a switch on the depth chart or make a switch from practice squad to the 53. But that's how I thought the receiver room would go, or maybe should go, and instead they went Thrash Bell.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's hard to make predictions like that when you're predicting two different things, like what should they do and what will they do,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Can you explain to everyone, and even me too, I've read it, but I just want to make sure I'm clear on this commissioner's list, exempt list. So he cannot practice with them, right? And how long will he be on this list? I mean, when, and you may have mentioned it already and I missed it, when are we going to see him?
No, we don't know, Judd. He cannot practice. He cannot play. He cannot practice, cannot play, cannot attend games. He can attend meetings in the facility, work out by himself, go to therapy, whatever non-football activities are available in the building, he can do those. No walkthroughs. And it's just a holding spot for Roger Goodell to put, I want to say, the most serious cases, or the more serious cases of legal proceedings. And domestic violence ranks high on that list, according to the NFL personal conduct policy. And rather than having a guy charged with domestic violence, active and eligible and playing, the league says, no, we're going to put him on this list, pay him, but he can't play. And he goes on this list while the legal proceedings play out, and probably more importantly, while the league's investigation plays out. So there's not an end date here. Maybe if the legal proceedings get cleared up, then that spurs the NFL to close its investigation. But even if the charges got dropped, the NFL could still discipline Hall, because that's within their rights in the collective bargaining agreement.
All right, Scott. Hey, the way of media, as we just talked about all that quarterback talk, we have breaking news right now. The Browns have made a move in the quarterback room.
Yeah, they are releasing Tyler Huntley. So they couldn't work out a trade to get a draft pick in return, so they decided to release him, open up a roster spot, and the plan is to bring back running back Dante Foreman. So stuff we talked about, we thought it might happen, and it did happen. Unfortunately for the Browns, they couldn't get any draft pick back for Tyler Huntley, but Dante Foreman is coming back.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm glad we talked about all that stuff because it set this up and kind of backs up what you had said. So obviously, and I think we knew this, they did not want to part ways with DTR.
No, I think he earned a spot, Chud. They entered training camp. I think it was a legitimate competition for that number 3 job between DTR and Huntley. Huntley had the experience advantage. DTR is coming off the dislocated hip against the Texans on Christmas Eve. Didn't look good in his limited playing time as a rookie. And I thought looked really good in camp in the preseason. I've mentioned it before, but it really stuck out to me. The arm strength looked better than it did a year ago. And you saw it in some tight window throws. You saw it down the field. He looked decisive. Now, it wasn't perfect. Everybody, the preseason numbers are good. But against Seattle, he threw into double coverage. Could have easily been an interception. I think he got tipped at the line, or else it would have been intercepted. So it wasn't perfect. I still like Jameis Winston as your number 2. I'm not ready to say DTR should be your number 2 like he was last year to start, and we saw how that worked out. I think you have to roll with Winston, but I think DTR certainly earned a roster spot and probably, in my estimation, cannot even be traded because he could have a future as their number 2. Jameis Winston's on a 1-year contract. Looking down the road, I think the Browns believe DTR could be their number 2. So why trade him for a low-round draft pick, right? So I think it makes sense, and I think he earned a longer look, and it's certainly this roster spot.
Yeah, and that goes back to the final preseason game. Huntley getting most of the work there at the end of the game,
Yep.
so it all adds up if you put it together, right?
Yeah, and you can't always read into that, but it's a bad sign normally when a guy's playing the last at the end of a preseason game. Or the end of the preseason finale, for sure.
Yeah. And before we talk about all the news of the week and looking ahead to the weekend, just wrap up that Seattle game. Is there anything we need to discuss on that? Anything that, I mean, we've seen the roster cuts now.
Yeah.
Is there anything that is glaring that you'd like to hit on?
No, we already talked about receivers. Thrash makes a long touchdown catch from DTR. Michael Woods has 2 touchdowns from Huntley in the second half. Those are the biggest things that stood out to me. And then the fact that Siaki Ika doesn't make this roster. I don't want to just miss out on that. We focus on the guys that make the roster and come back on the practice squad. I think it's necessary to talk about Ika. He's a 3rd-round pick a year ago. They had high hopes for him. And, I mean, they didn't have 1st and 2nd-round picks last year. So he was one of their first picks. They draft him, and then he just doesn't do anything. He played 4 games last year and played 100 snaps on defense, had no tackles, which feels like it's hard to do when you're in the middle of the defensive line. And then this preseason, you think, okay, he's going to take a jump in year 2. Just never saw it. And I'd focus on him for certain plays in the games, and you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing penetration. You're not seeing him taking out blockers. I'd see his back turned to the line of scrimmage as he's kind of trying to fight or hold up 2 blockers, I guess. It just didn't seem to be a fit at all with what coordinator Jim Schwartz wants to do, which is have his linemen attack. And I just don't think Ika's cut out for that. I think if he's going to have a job in this NFL, it's a 2-gap nose tackle that just clogs up space. And that's not what the Browns want from their D tackle. So it was just a miss. They thought they could turn him from the dump truck to the Ferrari, and they were wrong.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Meant to mention that earlier, but there's so much to get into with the roster cut. So I'm glad you did, in fact, mention that. So one last thing on the Seattle game, though, is the fact that Watson didn't play. And last time we talked was before the game. So obviously they made the decision. How do you feel about that? I know we discussed it before the game, but now that we know that he didn't play, we're looking at, what is it, almost 10 months, over 300 days from game action to game action now, Scott.
Yeah, it's certainly worth noting that it's been that long, and coming off the surgery and not having played a lot in the last 2 years, all the things we talked about that were factors into it. But Kevin Stefanski, and it probably is the organization as a whole, determined that he was better off taking that night off. And I'm sure the sore arm was a factor, even though he came back and practiced and threw, according to the Browns, a full complement of reps on that Thursday. He did stop practicing because of a sore arm a week ago Wednesday. That has to be a factor. What was more of a factor, according to Stefanski, is the guys around him. Injuries at left tackle. Left guard Joe Bitonio got the night off. Receivers, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and tight end David Njoku all did not play. So if you're going to put Watson out there and the left side of the line is compromised, he doesn't have his main guys to throw to, is it really worth it? Just the operational part of it. And you can make an argument that it is. And, I think Watson wanted to play, but I understand the decision not to. And as much as this is a topic right now, I think when you get to week 1, that disappears. And maybe if Watson comes out and looks terrible, everybody will say, well, he didn't play in the preseason, and that argument will linger for a bit longer. But I tend to forget it once you get to week 1. You get 2 weeks before, all of a sudden it's a regular season. The preseason's just such a different animal. And, the Browns have won their last 2 openers. I know the record before that is terrible, but they've won the last 2 under Kevin Stefanski. I feel like he does know what he's doing to a certain extent. Maybe Watson's the exception, which you needed to get him reps, but I don't think it'll have a big impact when we get to Dallas.
Yeah. Another thing we talked about last time was Nick Chubb, and I had asked you, I never really felt like he was going to be ready for game 1, but then there was that, you saw him with the sprinting and in the weight room, and, maybe that false sense of hope for Browns fans,
right.
But really not a surprise, is it, Scott, that he's on the PUP list, so he will not play in the first 4 games for sure.
It is not a surprise, Chud. But you're right. When I saw him and some other reporters saw him run for the first time at the Greenbrier, and you saw him do those squats back in his high school in Georgia, it made you think, is he going to be back sooner than everyone expected? And the answer is no. The Browns are being really cautious with him. It completely makes sense. They never expected him to be back before October at the earliest. So I think it is business as usual with Nick Chubb. But yeah, there was a sense of, oh my gosh, can he really pull this off and getting back by week 1? But that was never realistic and probably never even a thought by the Browns because it's such a serious injury. They need to be so careful with him.
Yeah. A lot of injury news, some good, some bad. Number 1, we can start on the offensive line, and Jack Conklin back, but we're questioning what's happening on the left side of the line. What are we looking at left tackle?
Well, we haven't seen Jed Wills practice yet. I saw him walk off. He watches practice, and Kevin Stefanski says he's going through walkthroughs, which is a good sign. It's a step forward. He passed his physical. Monday he was activated. He's he's starting the season on a 53-man roster, but he hasn't practiced yet. So in the meantime, Jack Conklin's going to get some reps at left tackle. Kevin Stefanski hasn't come out and said it. He's being coy about it, but there's no doubt that Jack Conklin's going to get some reps there. And then it becomes, can either one of those 2 guys be ready by September 8th? Conklin hasn't played since the opener a year ago. His knee was destroyed. He's torn ACL, MCL, PCL, meniscus. So he thinks he can be ready in 2 weeks, but it seems like it's asking a lot. He practiced Tuesday, took Wednesday off as part of his ramp-up period. Jed Wills, he hasn't played since, he had surgery in December. Is he going to be ready? Even if he takes the field, we're taping this Thursday morning. Even if he takes the field Thursday, and then, which he probably won't, and they come back to practice Monday. So let's say it goes Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. Is 4 practices enough? I think you could see Wills, Conklin, or James Hudson III, any of those guys play at left tackle week 1, which is still disconcerting if you're the Browns to not have the answer. Right now, I feel like Conklin might be their best option, but it's all about how does that knee hold up. He's not worried about making the switch from right side to left side. He played left tackle at Michigan State. He says, I played it at a high level. He's still really confident in his ability and thinks he can make the move to the left side. But does the knee allow him to do that? Is he, all those things that you have to get past when you're coming back from a major surgery, can you get past them by September 8th? And that's a huge question. But I think that is the Browns' plan A right now, is to have Conklin ready to play left tackle.
Scott, are you concerned about the offensive line?
Well, not long term. Chud, because I like DeJuan Jones, and then you got Teller and Posick and Batonia. So 4 out of 5 right now, I feel really good about. Left tackle, obviously, a key position, and they have to figure that out. I think between Wills and Conklin that they'll be able to manage that position. And they'll be able to have a quality guy at left tackle for the majority of the season, barring a new injury. But week 1, with Micah Parsons and that Cowboys defense, that is a concern. And let's say it's James Hudson III. Then you're going to have to help him. And we saw how the Browns did that at the end of last year. Both their tackles were out last year, their starting tackles. So you just have to help, and it changes your game plan, and you have to be more careful and those kind of things to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. But I think they'll be okay because I feel like 80% of the line is really strong right now, and they just have to figure out that left tackle spot. But there are candidates coming. It feels like there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Let's go to the defense now. Good to see Greg Newsome returns, but Denzel Ward's still out.
Well, Denzel Ward practiced yesterday, Chud. Still in the protocol, but practiced. And that's a really good sign. It's the last hurdle before he completely clears the protocol. So I expect him to be ready to go against the Cowboys. I think he's going to talk to the media Thursday afternoon. So both are good signs. They got Dalvin Tomlinson back. They got the linebacker Jordan Hicks back. The defense is pretty much full strength. Ward is the last piece of that. I mean, Tomlinson's important, Newsome's important, but Ward is extremely important there. So I think the defense is going to be full strength heading into that opener. Now, the bigger question, and we've talked about it, is the number of concussions for Denzel Ward. This is number 5 that we know about since he entered the league in 2018. And, Denzel's talked about it before, and he says it's not a concern for him. He does his research, and when he comes back, he's healthy and he can go out and play. And I expect him to say the same thing today. But being an outsider, it's concerning the number of concussions.
Yeah. So the Browns practices this week. They practiced on Tuesday. They did not practice on Monday, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So he was back Wednesday, Denzel.
Yes, he practiced Wednesday, still in the protocol. I would assume if he's talking to us today, which is the plan, I expect him to practice today and then be fully out of the protocol.
Okay. All right. Any other injuries to touch on? Any other concerns?
No, I think those are the main. Naheem Hines, the returner running back, is opening the season on the injury list. Still coming back from an ACL. He thought he'd be back by now. That's a little disappointing. They're going to have to figure it out at returner. It'll probably be Pierre Strong Jr., at least in the kick game. And then maybe they bring up Jalen Darden or James Prochet II off practice squad to be a punt returner week 1. But that's about it. Maurice Hurst II is still out with a hamstring. The rookie linebacker, Brookie Watson, still out with a quad. David Bell, the receiver we talked about earlier, still out with a quad. But none of those guys are, starters. They're rotational guys, but nothing big. And plus, we still have another week for somebody to come back. But they cleared a hurdle with the guys that came back to start this week. And we mentioned them: Newsome, Conklin, Tomlinson, Njoku. All these guys come back. They got a big boost early this week.
Yeah. So how do things look now, Scott? Practice today on Thursday, and then is the entire weekend off, and they come back Monday, then they get into their normal schedule with Tuesdays off, and then, they really ramp it up on Wednesday, Thursday. Is that where we're at now?
That is correct. The new CBA, whenever that was signed, 2020, the players get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off league-wide. So that's why they practice today. Most guys, there are plenty of guys, I don't know if I say most, get on a plane, go somewhere for the weekend. It's their last weekend for a long time until the Browns bye week. And then they come back, practice Monday, normal day off Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's in the regular season week.
Yeah, and it's Dallas. And CD Lamb, did you see that? He signed the big contract, so I'm not shocked there at all that, I maybe it took a little bit longer than maybe people might thought, but I mean, with Jerry Jones, you never know. But bottom line is CD Lamb will be there on Sunday the 8th.
Yeah, and that's big. They don't get a deal done with Dak, but Dak wasn't holding out or holding in whatever CeeDee Lamb was doing. So, Micah Parsons didn't get a contract. So they have some long-term issues in Dallas, but their main guys are going to be out there. And Lamb is a huge one. I mean, led the league in catches last year. He's obviously, really good player, great chemistry with Dak Prescott. It's going to be a challenge for the Browns secondary, but the Browns think they have the best secondary in the league. So, it's going to be interesting to watch how that matchup plays out. And Lamb certainly adds to that. I always expected him to play. You wonder if a guy missed that much time in training camp, does it affect him at all? And it might. Like, he might not be his normal self. I don't think the Browns can count on him not being his normal self, but you just never know, right? We've seen guys come back, they hurt something, or they're just not as sharp. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I expect him to be really good because he is really good.
One other note I wanted to mention, the Steelers have their starting quarterback. They announced Russell Wilson is the guy, right?
They did, and that wasn't a surprise. I like Justin Fields a lot, and I thought he might push Russell Wilson, and I think he did push him. But when they signed Russell Wilson, they planned on starting him. And it's way easier to go from Wilson to Fields than Fields to Wilson. So Steelers are going to see. They're going to ride with Russ for a while. We'll see how that goes. I don't think Fields was as good in the preseason as maybe I thought he would be. There were some issues. I know there were a bunch of fumbles. I thought he showed some bright signs from what I'm hearing and seeing out of Pittsburgh. So it's going to be interesting to monitor that all year long because I don't think they're married to Russell Wilson at all. And we know how tough this division is. And if they get off to a slow start, you could see Pittsburgh make a big quarterback move.
And it's kind of like Stefanski said, it's the first 53, but not the final 53. Yeah. He might be the first QB, but he might not be the last.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I know you got to get to practice and look forward to a nice little holiday weekend here. So enjoy yourself. And unless you got anything else, I'm out.
I got one more quick thing, Chud. Another thing that happened this morning. Deshaun Watson, they restructured his contract again. And It's a third straight year they've done it. And it doesn't affect anything for this year. They clear almost $36 million in salary cap space, gives them an NFL high $62 million in salary cap space, which would allow them to do a big move if they wanted to do a big move, whether that's a trade or an extension or whatever. But it's mostly, at least my belief is, and it's because the last 2 years they did the same thing and there wasn't a major move that followed it. It's all about giving yourself salary cap space so you can roll it over to the next year because they have all these big contracts. And because Watson has a salary cap hit of $73 million each of the next 2 years, you need to save as much cap space as you can now and push it down the road. So that's what the Browns are doing, but it's significant the amount, the numbers attached to this, that it's, $36 million cap space they're saving. What they're doing is they turn the salary into a signing bonus. So almost $45 million of the $46 million salary turns into a signing bonus. So it's, again, the Haslam's are willing to spend cash to give the Browns greater salary cap flexibility moving forward. So it's a lot of, in the weeds numbers. It doesn't mean anything for Deshaun Watson's future. The contract's still 5 years. It just means the Browns are finagling the numbers, and at some point, they're going to have to pay the piper as they push salary caps down the road, or big salary cap numbers down the road. But it's not coming this year.
All right. Well, I'm glad you got that in.
Yep. Cool. Well, thank you, Chud. It's another. I thought this might be a little lull of a week, but there's always stuff going on. Roster cuts. I should have known better. So we'll do this again next week. We'll do game predictions and season predictions for the Browns and maybe the league, huh, Chud?
Yeah, no question. I look forward to that. Yeah, cool. Here we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chud. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Covered Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.